All right, guys, welcome back to more progress on the Audi. She'll get finished one of these days. At least that's what I keep telling myself. I got races to race here pretty soon, so we're trying to go as fast as we can. First race is in December. Likelihood, it being the middle of November when I'm filming this, is relatively low. So we're gonna do our best, aim for December, and if not, hopefully we can hit January when the next one is after that. But today we are gonna cut the core support out of the Audi. We have to get the core support. Got to get this cut out, replace it with a new bar. This takes up too much space for the intercooler. The intercooler is probably going to sit here forward. We have that big grill from our other videos that's going to go over here and give us a whole lot of room up front for an intercooler. So, but in order to do that, we got to get this cut out. We'll make our new reinforcement bar that'll go from here over to here, and that way we'll have an easier time modifying it and the intercooler to mount to it. So tonight, all I'm really trying to do is just get this core support cut out. One thing I do want to mention, though, is obviously moving blankets covered this. Moving blankets are not non-flammable, but I don't have anything that's non-flammable. And I mean, it's not like we're welding. We're just using an angle grinder, so the sparks don't do a whole lot of damage. And I would rather lightly set this on fire than damage any of my engine paint. And definitely anytime you're grinding just in general, like my glasses especially, but my windshield, because I put a new windshield in this car while it was still sitting in Helena. Those sparks will burn little pits into glass without any issue, because normally, you get them on yourself, you get them on your body, you have it happen when you're using an angle grinder, they hit your pants. Nothing really happens. But one of those sparks gets on your glasses or gets on a fresh windshield, and it'll pit it really bad. And I did not spend as much money as I did to get a windshield in an 80s Audi just to have it get pitted by an angle grinder. So that's why everything's covered up. We're all about safety here at the GuD-NuF garage. But yeah, let's get to cutting. Well, there you go. That was a awfully scary project. That really wasn't all too scary. You have no idea how long I've been putting this off. I'm just like, I don't want to mess up anything. You can't go back when you start cutting stuff out. But yeah, so she's cut out. Obviously, just need a little bit of grinder work, help clean up everything. But a new bar will go there. We'll have space for this big, beautiful intercooler. Yeah, and we're gonna be good to go. More of this is gonna have to get removed. That's a later thing, though. It's like, spot welded on there. Need to get actually in there and bust it loose. But yeah, she's looking pretty good now. So yeah, we'll be on our way. Moving blankets, we're talking about a little overkill. You saw in that time lapse, like, sparks, I mean, make sure that you put your sparks where you want them, down towards me. Obviously, I'm not burnt. And like I said, I'd rather torch a pair of pants than some of the stuff that I have in here. So, point your sparks in the right direction, but you can never be too careful. You can't go back once you burn something you don't want to burn on accident. So, rather safe than sorry. And you can even look, there's no real damage in here or anything like that. So, a little over the top, but I'll take it. Moving on, here in the next couple of days, I'm going to start testing some material for a support bar. I have some stainless that I was just lucky enough to get from a friend. That being said, stainless is generally pretty hard, so I don't even know if I can really drill through it, but we'll give it a try, see if it's usable, because I'd rather use stuff that I have than have to go buy more stuff. And then bar stock might not necessarily be as rigid as we want it to be for a core support bar. But right now, we're in the interest of getting it done. I'm not too worried about the flex of this car. Everything is so far back in the engine bay. Yes, there will be extra flex because this is not in here. And a stainless bar, even if it's not as rigid as we want to be, will be better than nothing. So it'll be something if we have to go that route. But obviously, cutting this out, you do lose some structural rigidity to the car. So keeping that in mind if you're doing anything like this. And if I do have to go with the stainless, at least temporarily, it's not going to be a permanent thing. You do want that structure there, and I will figure out a way to make it as structurally sound as I can at a later date. But right now, we need to get an intercooler in here so we can design and custom do that and get everything hooked up. Some of that stuff like reinforcement bar, I can change at a later date easy enough, and I'd rather be moved a little farther ahead now. So yeah, we'll get to it and we'll get a reinforcement bar made. All right, so for making this reinforcement bar, I've gone through here, cleaned this up. I had to cut a little bit out right there. Didn't have to cut anything out there, but still cleaned this up. We need something from out there to about there, and I've had a couple of different ideas. I have this bar stock. Unfortunately, you know, this way we're not extremely rigid, so I'm not super on board with the idea of trying to use this stock, so I figured I'd try something else first. I was able to get a scrap piece of whatever this is, and I just cut a bar out of it. Yeah, I made myself some square tubing. It's not super thick wall, but it would probably work for what we're doing. And then for the other side of it, I'm in the process of getting it squished. Now this definitely isn't the prettiest thing in the world, but hopefully you get this flattened out and profiled, and it shouldn't be too bad. Because this will sit about right there and come out to about right there. Obviously that's way too wide, and we'll cut these edges off, and then we'll weld up the sides so it still has the strength. But yeah, it's pretty much gonna go there, sit over to there. Doing one side first, and then we'll just make shorten the other side to match. I have what I'm pretty sure is like enough overlap over here so we can get at least 2 bolts into it. That's kind of a big hole, so the goal is to at least get 2 bolts in either side. We're actually doing pretty good here, but of course this will just take some profiling. Obviously a straight across bar is not how this really worked, so going straight across, it's going to take a little bit of weird profiling on the ends to get that to work. But yeah, so just beating on it with a hammer, and gonna have to do some grinding in a bit. All right, so we got a pretty good amount of this flattened out. Like I said, we're gonna weld the sides, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the cutoff wheel and get the sides cut off, because that'll be flat enough in here that we can weld it, and then I'll leave a little bit back here just so we can make it complete and make sure that everything still fits up right. All right, so we got these sides cut off, pretty easy there. Now I'm just going through with a grinder and starting to do the initial profile here. We got to get this, make sure it's narrow enough. And then, like I said, once this is all profiled out and we know it fits, then I'll go weld over everything and hopefully give us our strength back. All right, so here it is, if it'll focus, maybe. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's thin enough that it fits now. And then we will do a bit of the fine tuning later. Like I said, got to weld all of this up, make sure that this is all still sturdy, because right now this isn't the strongest thing in the world. But you get that welded up and then it's one piece again, and then we're not doing too bad. So that's that side's gonna be done for the time being. Like I said, a little more fine tuning to do. Got my line drawn where I need the other one flattened too. And then we need to flatten this side and do the same thing. So there it is, the other side cut up, cleaned up. But yeah, now it's just time for profiling. And yeah, we'll get it figured out how it's gonna sit in there. It's actually, I mean, it'll sit underneath like that, so it's not sticking above the bar, just to make sure that everything still matches up with factory. But yeah, so that's how that's going to sit. That'll go in there. Same thing with the other side. This other side actually has enough room to go deep enough to also line that one up. Things are pretty much profiled out. Probably still got a little more to do, but we're going to wait until after welding to do much more. Because also, I'm hoping to go with something like 3/8 for these bolts. And we're getting pretty dangerous, you know, on some of those distances there. That's about as thin as I'm willing to go. I mean, this is all going to be sandwiched together, so we have a little leeway on that. But I definitely don't want to go any thinner than that. This side's quite a bit beefier than the other side. I mean, this side gets narrow quicker and has a nice angle to it. This one stays pretty fat for a while, which is why that one's allowed to be thicker. But with this one being more narrow like this, you know, there's just so much I can do. Fine. And the seam weld will go deeper in there and help fuse everything together. That'll be a bit of a patch job, don't get me wrong. That won't be the cleanest thing. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I weld this, unfortunately, though, it's going to get thicker again. So I'm going to have to go through and weld. But the goal is to get everything welded deep and penetrated well, so I can grind back into it and have it still be a pretty solid piece of metal. But yeah, so next step is to weld this. We definitely don't want to drill any holes before this is welded, because that's just a recipe for disaster with how thin that is. So yeah, it's coming together. Things need to be flattened back out a bit, obviously, but all in due time. But yeah, so next step to get her welded, and I will see you guys then. All right, well, here it is, all cleaned up, welded, ground back down. Some good progress. Obviously, still not flat, but that's what bolts are for. We'll suck that up there and it'll be all right. Same on the other side. You know, once again, this is a bit thinner than I would like to see, but can always be fixed later. I just need something that's in the car so I can keep everything moving along. But everything's seam welded down the side. That was a huge patch job. You didn't want to see that before I ground that down. And then we got a couple of spot welds in here. It just kind of will help keep everything sandwiched, especially when I start drilling on it and stuff like that. But anyways, this is pretty much ready just to mount up in the car. This will get put in here, and of course we deal with long lengths, so it's gonna look like that, and then like that. So yeah, she'll sit up in here. I got some like kind of initial ideas for holes ironed out, but we'll go ahead, start drilling stuff. We're only gonna do one hole at a time. You don't want to get ahead of yourself and drill holes and have one of them match and the rest of them not. So we'll do one of them at a time, 2 on each side, and we'll get this bar in here. Well, here we have it. Core support in the car. Drilled it, bolted it, mounted it. She's ready to rock. Figured you guys didn't want to watch me drill holes for a few minutes. But yeah, so she's in there. She's bolted down good and tight. And, you know, if you're wondering, hey, you know, that spacing looks a little different than this spacing. Well, you know, it's good enough, and so that's all we need to make this thing run. You know, not ideal, but this hole really kind of threw off where that was getting mounted. It would have been mounted closer to the edge like this one. But since this helps the car not do this up here, you know, I couldn't really put it in a slotted hole like this with a smaller bolt, because it kind of defeats the purpose. Then you have some wiggle room, you know, theoretically, should anything happen. So this one got shifted over so I can put it into metal. These ones are placed pretty well, my bad. But yeah, so there we go. There's a core support. It'll get painted, you know, that's, you know, later date. Now that this is in here though, more progress is good to go. We can get a grill mounted up, put on here, so we have that fat rally look on the front. And then along with that, we got an intercooler that needs to be modified, fabbed up, ready to go. And then hiding out back there, there's also a radiator sitting in that box. So we got a radiator, we got an intercooler, throttle body thing's working out. We can see that progress over there. A lot of projects going on right now. But things are rolling. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to get racing this year.